peut y aller. Professeur Lejeune a la parole.
Bon, on va le dire à la fin.
Madame, Monsieur le Président, vous serez peut-être étonné qu'un généticien
Il commence, le jeune.
parle de la topologie du suaire qui est à Turin, du suaire de Lier et du suaire de Près, mais c'est parce que l'habitude de manier des symboles embrouillés pour essayer de savoir quel était le modèle qui expliquerait le mieux l'accident est une chose habituelle aux généticiens. Je commencerai par la topologie des brûlures du 4 décembre 1532. Lors de l'incendie, une goutte, vous pouvez fermer la porte un peu plus, une goutte de métal en fusion, il n'y a pas de traduction? Une goutte de métal en fusion tomba sur le suaire qui se trouvait à l'époque plié en 48. Pour le savoir, il suffit de regarder les pauvres Clarisse qui inséraient des nappes d'hôtel, mais qui conservèrent les endroits du suaire qui, quoique roussis, étaient encore solides, puis fixèrent le tout sur la toile de Hollande qui existe encore aujourd'hui.
L'analisi
I can speak.
je pourrais parler anglais si vous voulez, mais à ce moment-là, on aura besoin de la traduction en français. So I would like to make a remark. The image shows us, and this is a scheme traced on a piece of cloth to the right. Here you can see the sketch of Christ. His crossed arms. Here we have two series of burn marks, symmetrical, so the central image is preserved. And then each line is a symmetry axis for the lesions surrounding it. So it's quite clear that on the top, this top part was folded downwards, and this is folded once again. So the shroud was folded along the length axis, folded once again. You see what we show with this example in order to show you the size the shroud had once folded. And if you look at the detail, you see that these burn marks, which have been mended by the sisters, overlap precisely. So it is the discoloring produced by the water which was put on the tissue. So this portion, this part of the shroud is folded, and you see here the damage caused by the diffusion spots. And this gives us an exact idea of the overlapping of the cloth. Then it is folded three more times, once here, and so we come to the way it was preserved in the casket where it lay and where the damages were produced. And if you look here, you see a line of 3 burn marks, which is placed where the tissue was preserved from the Chambéry fire, the place which was spared by the Chambéry fire. So the only part which had not been burnt in Chambéry had already suffered burning at an earlier time. So this just confirms the history as we know it, because these 3 tiny spots with a side spot can be understood readily if we fold the shroud once we have folded it along the longitudinal axis, so on the dorsal part. And here we are looking at the dorsal side. You see here that the holes are larger and more numerous than on the frontal part. So this gives us holes which get smaller, and if we overlap it, if droplets of melting metal fall on this linen, damages are caused, and history tells us that the artist who copied the work preserved at Saint-Omer at the Lier Cathedral, and I wish to thank Josbert, who is the secretary of the Saint-Omer works, who allowed me to look at the Lier shroud to take photographs, and we see that on this Lier shroud there is a depiction of the Turin shroud. It is not an original, because if you look at the hands, could you please turn the light down? These are tiny spots surrounding the image of the hands, and this tells us that those who copied it used a sharp pencil and copied shrouds. So this is not an original work, but a copy. This is attributed to Brest-Turin. And we know that Brest-Turin, who was the first of the scientific painters, because if we look at the pictures he made on the basis of the works by Schangauer, who was his master, then you see that there is a window reflected in the eye of his painter. So a man who can paint so well would never make such a bad copy of a hand. Could you please turn the light off? So these images are really paramount, first of all because they are dated, and then because here we have holes which are quite special. These were not reproduced by painting them, but they were overlapped afterwards. They are colored red, which tells us that whoever made this image failed to understand what the marks were reproducing. So it's quite clear that this is not the true shroud, because these holes are not geometrically placed. The right ones are higher than the left ones, so there is not geometrical correspondence. The other detail is that the color is totally invented. The author believed that these were blood spots, so this proves at once the fact that this is a copy, and also the honesty of whoever painted this, because he reproduced something he did not understand, but anyway he marked them with the red color, since he did not imagine that they were burn marks. He thought they were blood mark. So what is interesting here is that before the Chambéry fire, the copier, I would say the makers of this, knew that they could not show a real image of the shroud without indicating these small marks. Here we have only 3 points, whereas on the other side we have 3 plus 1. In the shroud of Turin, you see that what is placed on the right of the image is barely visible in the Turin.
Sur le sphère de Lier, dont je pourrais vous parler plus longtemps, car c'est
That's why they are not represented here. It is quite interesting and touching image, a testimony of the naive character of the author. And it is only also an evidence of the enriched copy they made. And now let's come to the Code of Prayer. I would like to show you how the Lier author depicted the head section of the Shroud of Turin. It's not very precise, it's quite rough, but this is surely a copy from the Shroud. He made a black and white circle around the eyes, and black was used in the eyes. This does not resemble the apples of the eyes. So this image is based on a peculiar interpretation because all the other shrouds are closer to the image of the shroud. And now let's come to the iconography of the Code of Prayer. Father Dubarle had noted that an image of the shroud was included in the famous Codex of Prayer. Like Mrs. Bonger already said, we have a precise dating 1192-1195 because we have a number of historical notions referring to this, and in the text it is explained that the king mentioned here is still living, whereas we know that the king died 2 years later, so the historical precision is absolute. So when we apply to the Library of Budapest, our application is met by approval, is met with scarce tolerance. They just do not accept that we may doubt this dating. And it is thanks to the help, the precious help by Mr. Cheldrus, that I got the extraordinary privilege of examining the Codex closely. Of course, not with my bare hands, but I wore gloves so that no finger marks or animal proteins would be left on the Codex. And here I have an image of the sheet number 27 of this Codex. It is one single sheet. It is folded in 4 parts, and the 4 sections bear 4 different images. The first is a Christ on the cross, and quite unfortunately the background is quite discolored, as it often happens with ancient manuscript. But the one who was discoloring the sheet discovered that an image of Christ was depicted there, and he spared it. Here we can observe the image of a cross. It's quite expressive. A detail is worth noting. The ladder is fixed to the cross by means of a peg, and this way of placement prevents the ladder from slipping down. So this is an unparalleled technical precision. You will see that Nicodemo and Joseph of Arimathea hold the corpse of Christ, whereas St. John holds him and the Virgin holds the head of Christ. So the author is capable of depicting hands with an admirable precision. Here we have the detail of the thumb. I don't know whether this is Nicodemus or Joseph, but anyway, it's a paramount detail. Here we have the hands of the Virgin Mary, the right hand of the Christ. The thumb is abducted against the inner surface of the hand. I think that is abducted in extreme distension. Was not made depicted by chance. This image has already been shown to you by Mrs. Lejeune. You see here the crossed arms, but if you look at the detail, you see a red spot, a red mark on the forehead just above the right eyebrow. And since I personally viewed the original, I must state that this is not a mistake on the photos. It is intentional. It has been depicted by the author of the painting. Here we have the pious women, the three Marys, bringing the fragrances, and an angel having his feet on a peculiarly folded cloth, which may be the shroud, but anyway, we shall revert to this later on. These are the details of what I just explained. Here we have traces on the pectoral region. This is the image of the three Marys, the angel, the feet, both feet on the shroud, and this has been worn by the thumb. The thumb was kept inside the book in order to keep it open, so it's quite worn out. But anyway, the image is visible, it's still visible. This is the last page of the same book, of the same parchment. The first thing is that the musicians, the music bearers, are on 4 lines. It has been noted that the notes are the ancient ones, so they are on 4 lines. And musicography gives us an independent dating as compared with the dating by the National Library of Budapest, because this manuscript would have been written around the 1111 or 1120, but please note that on the cross of Christ, behind that there are 4 nails. So when we see the precision, the detail of the drawing of the cross, we cannot help thinking that the author of the image does not know that only 3 nails have been were used. And please note that the mark of the nail is usually in the hand, whereas here is in the wrist. Of course, in the Turin shroud, only the right wrist is visible, not the left. And then we notice that the author of this picture, of this image, knows that on the image of the shroud, the Christ has a beard, has long hair, has a spot on the right eyebrow, knows that the corpse is lying, and has visible traces on the chest. The right hand is resting on the left one. The thumbs are not visible. The fingers are long. There are traces of nails on the right wrist, and that there are 3 nails in total. All these details are not found together on any other known image other than the Turin Shroud. So we are forced to conclude that either the artist of the Codex of Lier could see a model between 1100 or 1120, or this artist could prefigure all these markings with an annotable precision. Here in this magnification we see two completely different parts. One is covered by small red crosses, which seems a second layer of cloth on the shroud, and another part where these traces, these marks are visible of crossing, and perhaps the author wanted to represent the characteristic pattern used back then. So here we have 3 holes, and also in the other layer we can see 3 holes. So we have a problem of topology. If the 3 holes on the right line are oriented along the axis of this herringbone pattern, then these holes are perpendicular to the main axis of the shroud, which can be seen on the Turin Shroud. On the other hand, these holes along the same line are perpendicular as to the length of the shroud, so there are other possibilities. Unless this tells us something which is quite special. Here we see 3 crosses slanting in a linear way, which do not coincide with the rest of the painting. Perhaps there is a big error, or here we have a curious detail, because the idea of a cloth over the underlying cloth from a topological point of view is contradicted by the persistence of this line outlining the rim of the image. You will see that in this portion here there are red traces which are absolutely not similar to the herringbone or to the cross. The topological explanation would be that the artist wanted to show the inner lining, the cloth, and the characteristic marks of the Shroud of Turin, and in order to do so, a model can be built.
Faisons un modèle du suaire vu de...
I have 3 more minutes. So a model of the shroud can be built from the seen from the dorsal part before the Chambéry fire, and holes are already present. We can suppose that it has been covered by a layer, an inner lining, which was supposed to cover the whole of the shroud. The frontal part shows us quite roughly the figure of Christ, the holes, and a herringbone pattern which is imprinted on the frontal part. Here, if we fold the shroud, we see the lining. And if we fold the inner lining along itself, a rectangular shape is formed, But here we have a folder of the fabric. If we go to the point where hole exists, if the right part is sufficiently folded inwardly, this allows us to see that the 3 holes are slanted as compared with the drawing, and the crosses are going in an opposite direction as to the rest of the drawing. Here the frontal part was folded on the right, but now the lining is in the inner side and it protrudes in the frontal part. So the artist folded the shroud upwards. Now it is folded along the lining and then it is rolled. It is rolled on and on, and what we get to the point where the roll was displaced up to this position. So this is the position where the rolled cloth was placed. There is an exact point where the small image of that small red lines can be projected, and there is a site where the half face of the shroud of Turin can be projected. Now you see that the 3 holes are in the desired position, and in order to convince you, we can add this small angel walking on the cloth, and in order to get more detail, we can have a closer look. And we see that if we look at it not from the front but from the fringes rim, then we understand the image which could not be understood before. Here the shroud was rolled, here the cloth is protruding, whereas the other is laying flat. Of course, it is a soft cloth. So you see here on the visible part where the angel is walking, this was replaced by small crosses because the orientation of the drawing is different.